Hello, welcome to the Reasons for the Hope podcast out of St. Peters, Missouri. Today, the team will be discussing part 1 of our series on critical race theory and if it is compatible with Christianity.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a very sensitive topic about race, particularly the issue of critical race theory. With me today, I have Addison Egger. Addison, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. How are you?
Pretty good. Here, surviving these snowstorms, just like everyone else.
Right.
Yeah. So this is our first episode for Life Church regarding apologetics, and we chose the topic of critical race theory, as you know. Very sensitive topic. We believe this is very important, and we're trying to do our due diligence to make everyone aware of the church. So we wanted to, and this is for the audience, we wanted to bring this topic and kind of break down a little bit, first of all, of why is this important. And in light of that, I just want to start out and saying that the Christian believer must be equipped enough to identify when issues involving race are being used to manipulate people to ends which are contrary to the advancement of peaceful society. And I think that's probably at the core of my heart whenever it comes to this sensitive topic, because we Christians, we want to help people. We want to reach out whenever we see an injustice. We want to call it out, and we want people to understand and know that they all have the same value. And in that sense, we're very drawn to the just cause of rights, the just cause of bringing people up, lifting them up. And in that sense, we can actually be very manipulated, or very easily, I should say, because we can use this same framework to attract Christians, yet point them in a much different direction, which we believe is the direction critical race theory takes them to be. Is that kind of your perception as well, Addison, on this topic?
Yeah. Not only that, but as we'll discuss later, critical race theory and critical theory as a whole is a competing worldview, and Christianity is a worldview. And so when you have only room for one in your life, you must reconcile what is the truth between the two. And as you kind of alluded to, Christians can sometimes be caught off guard by the goals set up by critical race theory because they sound very similar to the goals that are within Christianity, such as seeking justice, fighting for those that are trodden on or less fortunate, who are in dire straits financially or whatever the case may be. So it's just that and I'll talk about this later, I suppose, but the devil's in the details, and we want to parse out the specifics of. It's not so much that the goals of critical race theory are bad; it's how they go about trying to achieve them. That's what is destructive.
Very true. As I reflect on this topic, there's something that hits me home a lot, and that is that in the area of apologetics, which is what we basically work with, and this is the ministry that we're trying to lift up for the benefit of the church and the community, is that oftentimes, and I'm not sure if this is your perception or not, but at least from my experience, that I've met many Christians in my life, and I'm not referring to just Life Church, but in many areas, many places throughout my Christian life, which is about a decade worth or so, that a lot of Christians are, I don't know, I don't like to put this type of labels or anything like that, but I've met a lot of people who know their scripture very well, that they can quote it very well, and that these are amazingly spiritual people. They pray for you, they really mean well, and they have actually a lot of them witness miracles. And that's a wonderful thing. Yet there seems to be the perhaps an element lacking on their wholeness as a Christian, if that makes sense. And that is this particular element that we were dealing with here. You know, the issue of the intellectual side of Christianity. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of the social issues that we deal in the country and anywhere we go in the world, they require many times a little bit of critical thinking and perhaps getting our feet wet with theology, sometimes philosophy, and all of these very important things that at the end of the day, they inform the Christian worldview, just like they did with the founding fathers. And I don't mean just of the United States and the country, but also we can see and trace this back to the apostles. A lot of the apostles, I mean, they were not trained like Paul was, but a lot of them they knew very well their history. They knew Old Testament scripture. They knew how to apply it. They had experience with the critical thinking of those things. Yet they were also perhaps I should say not blinded, but there a lot of times they had issues understanding what the Lord was saying to them in the parables. But then we have also Paul, who was a guy that persecuted the church with all the understanding he had. Then he had a life experience with Jesus. His life was changed. And God used the amazing knowledge Paul had to bring about changes that perhaps the other apostles were not going to bring about. God chose him, and he had a particular set of skills that were very, very powerful and practical whenever dealing with spreading the gospel. So, in a summary, on what I'm trying to say here is that the Christian person, the Christian in general, is not just the idea of the spiritual man or spiritual woman is not just a person who dwells in the spirit in the sense that they're just quoting scripture and praying and all these things, but it's also this person who needs to meet its intellectual side. It's a whole combination. It's the whole package. It's not just one thing and nothing of the other. There is a big combination. Not sure if you have it. I mean, do you follow me with what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah, and maybe I can add something that'll kind of summarize it, or add some pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
It seems as though Christians, they exist in their bubbles. You know, they go to church and they have their friends, and I'm sure there are many, many, many Christians individually who engage with the people around them that are not believers, or maybe that are believers, with the theology and philosophy side of it. But there's a point at which a Christian must mature beyond just knowing the scriptures in their head, but begins to apply them to their life. And when that happens, you're gonna naturally have clashes between what social pressures there are upon you, and then what you're reading in scripture and trying to integrate into your life. And so this is one of those things that whether or not we know it by name, there are attitudes or portions or the whole entirety of critical race theory within our structures in our country. And as a Christian matures and has to vote and has to interact with people around them that are of different races, or who have wrong or imperfect views on race, the Christian's going to have to know, how does Christ want me to express his love to this person, and in sometimes that involves correction, or not necessarily correction, but disagreement. and bringing reasons for that. So, unfortunately, it seems as though Christians can kind of live in their bubble and never ever move out of it because it requires this curricular activity, if you will. Does that make sense?
Well said. Yeah, I agree with you. That's very true. There is as we continue on just trying to expose and on start unraveling this topic. I was thinking of a few life experiences that may resemble some of this. I am originally from Panama, Central America. For those in the audience who may know the Panama Canal, that's where I am from. And I remember coming into the country, and basically my idea of the United States was this place I go to, the fulfilling your dreams, be whatever you can, and all of those things that are very encouraging to people. That's why they want to come here many times. But there was one of these life experiences regarding racial issues, which personally I don't feel like I was mistreated or anything like that, but that was just perhaps part of I started to understand some of the stereotypes that are being played. And the ironic thing is that I didn't like the stereotype not because they were stereotypes for Hispanic people, but just because they weren't of the right country. If that makes
Right,
sense. So, for
right.
instance, yeah. So for instance, that a lot of times I would be uh, confused with a
They'll call you
Mexican
a
person.
Mexican.
Yes,
Right,
and I'm
right,
like, excuse me, it wasn't even offensive that that just they call me a Mexican. It was that I'm not from Mexico, and I
right,
didn't like that. And
right.
it's kind of those things. I remember going to a restaurant one time. This was way back, like in 2006 or so, Mexican restaurant, and I went in with some of my college friends, which were you know they didn't look foreigner to me anyways, and we went to the restaurant to have some lunch, and the waiter comes in and starts asking everyone for what they want. They go around the table. When it comes to me, they didn't even uh uh what should I say that they didn't hesitate. They just right out spoke to me in Spanish, and I was like, what gave me away, and well, obviously I look like a Hispanic, like a Latino, but nevertheless it is those things that are like a stereotype, like what just happened here,
Right, right,
and those things personally I never found them offensive at all, but I did find and started understanding that there is this play on. There's a mix of cultures in the country, and sometimes we say things that may be insensitive, or even just play out part on the stereotyping without even noticing it, just because it's blended already in the culture. Now that's very relevant to this topic because there's a lot that rides on the issue of race that many times has nothing to do with racism. It's just culture and people misunderstanding each other. Sometimes people use words uh, that are not offensive at all, yet people take them to be offensive. And sometimes people say words that are very offensive in their etymology and how they were developed, yet they don't find it offensive at all. So
right.
there is all kinds of play on games in there. But I just wanted to highlight a little bit of those life experiences that may play out with this topic. I think you had mentioned to me in our private conversations that you had uh, experienced something similar, but more in the sense of conflict with friends, and can you do you mind elaborating on that?
Sure. Yeah, just in a nutshell, in regard to critical race theory as a whole, I didn't really know it by name at first. It wasn't until you asked me if I wanted to be a part of this podcast that upon reading about it, I was like, hey, I've experienced, you know, friends, stop talking to me because I disagreed with them on this topic. I just didn't
Mhm.
know it by name at that time. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, it hasn't happened too often, which I am happy about. But there have been a couple very heated conversations uh, over social media, or it wasn't so much in person because it was during COVID and nobody was seeing each other in person. But especially after George Floyd's death, as all of these issues of race began to boil up to the top of the social, melting pot, and I, uh, being the individual I am, had certain thoughts about things, questions about things that, I would put on Facebook, and sometimes, man, even though it was not my intention, it blew up in my face, uh, and I can't say that I had very strong friends stop being friends with me, but still, individuals that were within the Christian circles around me, and I think that was one of the things that was most concerning to me, was that what was supposed to unite us was that we were both Christians, that we both love the same Jesus, and that we desire to know the truth, and that we want to bring other people to understand His love and mercy, and here I had people that were willing to break off that
Bond,
friendship.
right?
So
Mm. Wow, it is a difficult issue for sure, and when we have conflicts like that, which brings me to the matter of the dangers that involve this topic that we want to uncover, critical race theory. So, um, just last year, 2020, the former president, he had issued an executive order regarding this particular theory, critical race theory, and I just wanted to read one piece uh, of the executive order, which I thought was very important. So I open quote and it says, "Today, however, many people are pushing a different vision of America that is grounded in hierarchies based on collective social and political identities, rather than in the inherent and equal dignity of every person as an individual. This ideology is rooted in the pernicious and false belief that America is an irredeemable racist and sexist country, that some people, simply on account of their race or sex, are oppressors, and that racial and sexual identities are more important than our common status as human beings and Americans." End quote. When I read that, I was like, wow, this summarizes very well, the present dangers that there is with critical race theory. The issue with oppression, how people are labeled, and how this becomes a problem for anyone um, in the country who, once you're seen as an oppressor, you're basically oppressing any other race, whichever one they're accusing you of. And being an oppressor, unfortunately, is not a matter of you actually oppressing in the sense that the word has been used for millennia, that you're actually oppressing someone. Rather, as long as you're not in favor of a particular group, whether it be a minority or not, as long as the people from that group consider you an outsider, you are an oppressor. And that is a very sad way of uh, engaging the culture. But unfortunately, it is being spread out, and it is something that we as Christians need to be very, very careful about. Um, have you seen, have you, I don't know, have you experienced or know of any other dangers that resemble this issue with oppression?
yeah, well, first I want to say that I'm not sure whether or not Donald Trump actually wrote that statement, but whoever
Right.
did write it, I think did an excellent job
Yes.
summarizing uh, what was trying to be said. Um,
Hmm.
I think the primary issue is that critical race theory, like I alluded to earlier, is a separate worldview than Christianity. And while we may have some of the same goals, and they are noble and just goals, the breakdown of how we are to achieve those goals are what makes what makes critical race theory dangerous. And so, as a whole, it's really the means that justify the ends. And after having studied it for a little bit, I understood a little bit more why there were riots and why there were individuals who saw some sort of connection between vandalism and destruction, and that this would somehow result in racial liberation. So I think that there's a physical aspect to the dangers, that it influences the actions of those around us or ourselves to the point where, regardless of whether or not you personally would do this, there are people that who are taking radical steps and violent steps in the name of justice, to attempt to free people that are being
Oppressed.
discriminated against.
Discriminated,
or
right.
oppressed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a physical aspect to it. I think that, as history has seen before, we've frequently run into people who have a political agenda, and they'll use Christianity or use the figure of Jesus and try to manipulate him into supporting their political agenda. And so I don't want my worldview, I don't want my life to start reflecting that. I want to follow Christ for what he said and who he was and what he did, and not be colored by these external, especially political bends. But so
Yes.
we basically we run the risk of losing a clear sight of the real Jesus if we're going in with these rose-colored glasses of critical race theory and examining Christianity with them, rather than examining critical race theory as a Christian. So
Yeah,
I
very
suppose
true.
that's the danger.
Yes, that is correct. I think another thing I wanted to mention is that this movement is spreading like wildfire, and we certainly don't want to be caught up in the middle of the cultural battle without knowing what we're battling.
Yes.
And this is for the audience. On the next episodes, on the series, we're gonna be unpacking more of this. Precisely, we want to define critical race theory and go into the ins and out, its claims, and so forth. So this particular episode is just to get you to understand why we chose this topic, why is it important, life experiences we've had, which may touch a little bit with the things we're going to be talking about, present dangers, which is the last thing we were mentioning. And another thing on the present dangers before we wrap this episode up is that this is also spreading in academia. There is many authors teaching this in several universities, and I had compiled a very small list in here, but I'm just going to throw out some names in here of authors that are actually people teaching, and they have actually written books on the topic, and they're spreading this. This is the doctrine that they're using. There's an author named Robin DiAngelo. This person wrote a book called White Fragility. This person is also teaching at the University of Washington in Seattle. So you can start seeing some of these patterns. There's another one named Richard Delgado, and another person, Jean Stephanique, I think it is the name. They also have a book on critical race theory and introduction. They are from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and also the University of Alabama School of Law. And just like that, I just mentioned 3 names in there, but there's more, and there's books coming out, and this is being taught on the universities. And from universities is moving into it's making a headway into not just in other high academic institutions, but it is going down also to public schools. And over the last decade, we have seen issues of that sort, but now it's taking more of a formal shape. It is more formal in the way that it's being presented, and when it's taking that form, eventually it's just gonna be another course that our children, our neighbors' children, or friends' children are gonna be being taught in school without much for us to say
Well,
against
and
it.
it may not be, it may not even be by this name. It's just that the
Yes,
tenets, the details,
very true.
are already being uh, swallowed hook, line, and sinker in our culture. So
Very true. So, for the audience, if anyone listening still, thank you very much for listening on this episode. And we just wanted to, like we said, just kind of bring about the reasons why we brought this topic up. And we hope that you stay tuned for the next episode and listen in into what is critical race theory. We're going to be talking about, like I mentioned earlier, defining terms. What does the movement claim, which is probably the most important part that you need to listen to. And then, lastly, we will be talking about its contrast with Christianity. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for listening to Reasons for the Hope.
Hello. Thank you for listening to Reasons for the Hope podcast. If you would like to learn more about us, you can find us on Facebook under Reasons for the Hope, RFTH.